People were clapping like I'd just saved the whole company, like I'd done something legendary. And maybe I had. I stood there in the middle of the conference room, lights shining a little too bright, my name echoing around, as the CEO raised his voice and said, "Gary's the man who made this happen. We double his salary and bump him up. He's earned it." I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. For a guy who'd spent 20 years behind spreadsheets and late-night problem-solving with vending machine dinners, this felt huge. Like, finally, someone saw all the things I'd been doing that no one ever clapped for. You ever have that moment where you think, maybe it was all worth it? That maybe loyalty, long hours, missing birthdays, and keeping quiet when you shouldn't, all of that actually paid off? Yeah, that was me in that moment. Heart pounding. Hands sweating. I'd been invisible so long that being front and center felt like stepping into someone else's life. Have you ever been promised something big by your boss, only to be let down when it really mattered? What happened? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear it. But here's the thing. Not everything that shines is gold. That big promise, that dramatic toast, it was all just noise. Empty noise. Because the truth came later. And it didn't knock. It kicked the door in and turned everything upside down. Stay with me. Because what started with a standing ovation turned into something no one saw coming. Not even me. The day that speech happened, it felt like my whole life had been leading to that moment. I'd never been the loudest guy in the room. I wasn't flashy. I didn't schmooze with executives or hang around the break room trading weekend stories. I showed up early, stayed late, and did the work no one else wanted to do. That's who I was. That's who I'd always been. But when that project came in, something so massive the entire future of the company was riding on it, I knew I couldn't stay in the background anymore. It wasn't just a project. It was the project. A legacy maker. The kind of thing they'd talk about in boardrooms for years. Our firm had been struggling to land major deals. Bigger tech companies were eating us alive in every bid. Then, out of nowhere, we got one last shot. A historic contract opportunity with one of the biggest logistics companies in the country. They wanted a full-scale overhaul of their back-end infrastructure, from inventory systems to live tracking AI. A 5-year partnership worth close to $40 million. But here's the catch. We had 3 months to deliver a working prototype. 3, not a year, not even 6 months. Just 90 days to pull off what most teams wouldn't dare try in double that time. And guess what? No one wanted to touch it. All the big names in the company, those guys who wore tailored suits and had assistant-filtered email inboxes, they passed. Quietly, of course. They didn't want their names attached to a failure. Not with the board watching. Not when a misstep this big could take your whole career down with it. That's when the offer came down to me. Or really, landed on me. I didn't volunteer, I didn't pitch. I was handed the keys because nobody else would drive. "Gary," the VP said in the hallway, like we were just talking about the weather. "We think you're the right guy for this." No one else did, but I nodded anyway. Not because I was sure I could pull it off, but because I knew if I said no, I'd regret it for the rest of my life. I went home that night and sat at the kitchen table, lights off, thinking about what this could mean. Not just for the company, but for me. My kids were grown now. My house still had a second mortgage. My wife had passed away 3 years earlier, and since then, I'd thrown myself into my work, trying to fill the silence. I wasn't chasing glory. I just wanted to feel like I had done something that mattered before I walked away. So I said yes. And once I did, I didn't stop. I didn't take weekends. I didn't call in sick. I didn't sleep much. My apartment turned into an office. My kitchen whiteboard became a blueprint. I worked with teams across time zones, fought through system crashes, rewrote code line by line at 2 in the morning just to make sure we didn't miss a deadline. I knew what was at stake. If I failed, I wouldn't just get fired. I'd become the guy they whispered about. Remember Gary? The one who tanked the Titan project? That'd be my legacy. But if I pulled it off, if this thing actually worked, then everything could change for me, for the company, and against every odd, it worked. 3 days before the deadline, we delivered the prototype. And it didn't just function, it impressed. The client's VP called our CEO personally, said it was one of the most elegant systems they'd seen, said it outperformed what 2 other firms had submitted by a mile. They signed the contract that same week. No more waiting, no more meetings. We had done it. And I'd done it with a team I had personally built from scratch, developers, analysts, testers, each one brought together like puzzle pieces. People I stayed up late with, shared takeout with, who gave everything they had just like I did. So, yeah, when the CEO stood up at the celebration party and told everyone I'd be getting a raise and a promotion, I believed him. I let myself believe him. And for a minute it felt like the risk had been worth it. But behind all the clapping and smiles and handshakes, something small tugged at the back of my brain. Why didn't they tell me about the speech beforehand? Why hadn't I heard anything official before the party? Still, I pushed the thoughts down. Maybe I was just being paranoid. I showed up to work the next day expecting something. A meeting, a call, even just an email, nothing. The same gray cubicle, the same blinking monitor, the same, "Hey man," nods from people in the hallway. Okay, fine. Maybe they needed a day or a week. HR, paperwork, whatever. These things take time, but a week passed, then 2. No update, no meeting, nothing. Then came the real hit. Instead of a promotion, I got a calendar invite titled Workload Adjustment Review. That was their nice way of saying, your hours are getting cut. Cut. After all that. I walked into the conference room and the people who once cheered my name wouldn't even make eye contact, and right there, in a 5-minute meeting with coffee cups still steaming on the table, they told me they were rebalancing responsibilities across departments and simplifying team loads. Translation: they were cutting my hours. Cutting me. The raise? Gone. The seat on the board? Never existed. The applause? Just a show. I walked out without saying a word, sat back down at my desk and stared at the computer screen like it might somehow explain what just happened. But deep down, I already knew. They used me, used my work, my time, my name, held me up like a trophy when it was convenient, and shoved me aside the second it wasn't. And I wish I could say that I got angry right then, slammed a door, sent a furious email, walked out with my box and never looked back, but I didn't. I sat there, quiet, because sometimes betrayal doesn't hit like a punch. It hits like silence. And in that silence, I started planning, not revenge, something better. Because if they thought that was the end of my story, they had no idea who they were dealing with. I didn't talk to anyone for the rest of that day, didn't respond to messages, didn't answer calls. I just sat there, pretending to work, eyes on the screen, heart dragging like it weighed 1,000 pounds. People walked by my desk like I wasn't there, like I had already become invisible. It's strange how fast you can go from being the face of a success story to being treated like a temporary contractor. Just a body filling a chair. They say people change when they get power, but the truth is, they just show you who they were the whole time. I didn't even tell my son that night. He called, asked how things were going. I said fine, told him I was just tired. I didn't want him to hear it in my voice, that all the work, the years I gave this company, had just been swept under the rug like they were clearing the stage for the next act. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going out like that. Not silently. That night I stayed up, not watching TV or scrolling through my phone. I opened my laptop and pulled up everything: emails, meeting notes, data logs, drafts of that prototype build. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for at first. Maybe some kind of proof. Maybe just to remind myself that I hadn't imagined it, that it was real, that I did the work, that it was mine. And the more I looked, the more it hit me. There was a pattern. They had slowly started freezing me out weeks ago. Little things. Emails I used to be copied on, not anymore. Meetings that used to include me, suddenly rescheduled or internal only. Even the team I had built, guys I'd handpicked for this project, were now reporting somewhere else. It wasn't a mistake. It was a plan. They wanted the win, not the man who made it happen. But I wasn't going to hand them my silence. I wasn't going to yell either. See, when you're young and someone plays you, your first reaction is usually to go loud, go public, cause a scene. But when you've seen a few decades, when you've been through enough storms, you learn how to move different. So I started doing what I do best, working in the background. First, I cleaned out my company laptop. Nothing dramatic, just made sure anything personal was off it. Anything useful, though, copied and stored, neatly labeled, dated, organized, emails with client praise, memos listing me as the project lead, timeline logs that showed exactly when I was assigned and how far I carried the work before anyone else even looked at it. Then, I did something I hadn't done in over 15 years. I updated my resume. It was weird seeing it again. My last serious job search had been before smartphones were a thing. But now, I had a list of achievements longer than most people dream of, and one very big win with a name that opened doors: the Titan Project. And here's the funny thing. Even after what they did, I didn't want to leave. Not yet. I wasn't done. I didn't want revenge. I wanted the truth to come out. I wanted them to realize what they'd thrown away. So I stayed. Showed up every day, quiet, focused, but always watching. I started connecting the dots, having coffee with people in other departments, asking small questions. I wasn't prying, I was listening, because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that office secrets don't stay secret. Not forever. Especially not when people start to feel nervous. And they were nervous. Something had shifted. I could feel it. Titan Corp, the client we landed the deal with, they weren't happy. I overheard it in hushed hallway chats. They want more involvement, one manager whispered. They're asking to meet with the original build team, another muttered during lunch. I didn't say a word. Just kept sipping my coffee, nodding like I wasn't paying attention. But inside, I was keeping score. And then came the slip-up. A young guy from marketing, real nice kid, always polite, walked by my desk and said, "Hey, Gary, Titan's been asking about you like crazy. They thought you were still heading the project. Should I tell them you're—" He stopped himself, caught the look in my eyes. "No worries," I said, calm as ever. "I'll take care of it." He nodded and walked off, but I sat there for a full 5 minutes staring at nothing. That was the moment I knew the company hadn't just cut me out. They were trying to erase me, rewrite the story to make it seem like I was never the reason the deal happened at all. And that was the final straw. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to write a long email to HR that no one would read. No, I was going to do what they never saw coming. I was going to let the client speak for me, But first, I needed to make sure the right people were watching. So, I made a few calls. Quiet ones. I reconnected with someone I knew over at Titan, someone who had been on every call, every demo, someone who knew exactly who built what. I didn't complain, I didn't ask for help, I just asked for a meeting. Off the record, just to catch up. And when I walked into that meeting room 2 days later, shook hands with a guy who once told me I was the only reason they signed, I knew something was about to shift. Not for me, for them. Because when you take credit for something you didn't build, you're building your house on sand. And sooner or later, the tide comes in. The meeting with Titan wasn't anything flashy. No big conference rooms, no catered lunch. Just a quiet corner office with glass walls, 2 chairs, and a carafe of black coffee between us. Across from me sat Marcus, their head of operations. I'd worked with him nearly every day for 3 months during the prototype build. We'd traded midnight emails, fought through system bugs, and talked strategy until both our eyes burned from staring at screens. If there was anyone who knew what really went into that project, it was him. He didn't waste time. After a few quick pleasantries, he leaned forward, his voice low but steady. "We've been asking for you," he said. "Didn't expect it to be this hard to get a straight answer." I smiled, but there was nothing warm behind it. Yeah, things got restructured. He sat back, his expression shifting to something more serious. "Gary, what's going on over there? We've been getting all these updates from people we don't know. The tone's changed, the direction's scattered. No offense, but it's like we're dealing with a team that didn't even touch the original build." That was the moment. The crack in the foundation. I didn't gloat, I didn't rush in with accusations. I simply told him the truth, piece by piece. I walked him through how I'd been reassigned, how my hours were cut, how I'd been left out of meetings, frozen out like I never led the charge in the first place. And Marcus? He didn't look surprised. He looked angry, not on my behalf, but on his own. "You know what burns me," he said, shaking his head. "You deliver a system we'd been trying to get for years, and now they're giving us half updates and junior staffers who barely understand the architecture." I stayed quiet, letting that sit in the air. Then he leaned in again, this time with intent. "Would you be willing to talk to our executive team directly? Just share your version. On the record." I didn't need to think about it. Absolutely. The moment I left that office, I knew the clock had started ticking. The people at my company who thought they could bury my work under corporate fog were about to get the one thing they feared most: clarity. Over the next few days, everything began to shift. Quietly, subtly. But if you knew what to look for, the signs were everywhere. First came the internal noise. Managers whispering in corners, closed-door meetings popping up in calendars that had been empty the day before. Slack channels went silent. Even the usual passive-aggressive, "thanks for looping me in" messages stopped showing up. Then came the emails. Not to me, at least not right away, but to the higher-ups. Titan's leadership had questions, direct ones. Why wasn't Gary included in the Phase 2 roadmap? Who had taken over the system documentation? Why were performance reports suddenly missing? My name was back in circulation, not because I asked for it, but because it never should have been removed in the first place. And now, people were scrambling. Jared, one of the senior managers who had conveniently forgotten to CC me for 2 months, stopped by my desk with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Hey, Gary, just wanted to check in. Everything going good on your end?" I looked up, held his gaze. "Things are getting interesting." He laughed nervously and walked off. But the way his shoulders were hunched told me what I already knew. They were sweating. Hard. By the end of the week, the dominoes had begun to fall. Titan requested a formal review meeting. Not with the current lead, not with any department heads, but with me. By name. It was a direct hit. The invite came in late Friday afternoon, and by Monday morning, my calendar was packed. HAR Legal, the CTO. People who hadn't spoken to me in months were suddenly looping me in on every conversation. Then came the meeting. Titan's full executive board on one side of the video call, our company's leadership on the other, and me sitting dead center. What happened in that meeting, I'll never forget it. Titan didn't dance around the issue. They laid it out clearly. We signed on because of the system Gary built. Not just the code, but the thought behind it, the long-term strategy, the scalability. We didn't just buy a product, we bought into his vision. And if he's not leading phase 2, we may need to reconsider the partnership. That single sentence hit like a hammer. On my side of the call, silence. The CEO, who once toasted my name like I was his golden boy, cleared his throat and tried to smile. We're absolutely committed to keeping Gary involved. We've been realigning some internal resources, but rest assured, he's a key player. I said nothing. Just let him spin. Because by that point, the choice wasn't his anymore. After the call, he asked to see me privately. His office looked the same, clean, expensive, full of that sterile glass and leather vibe all executives love. But the energy was different. The confidence was gone. He didn't offer me a drink, didn't even ask me to sit. He just said, "Let's talk." And so we did. He gave me his best pitch, said he realized there had been oversights, that perhaps certain promises had been miscommunicated. Offered me a small bump in pay, a new job title, a public acknowledgement of my role in the Titan success story. I stood there, listening, calm, unmoved, and then I said, "You're a little late." He blinked, like he didn't understand. "I've already got other plans," I said, turning to leave. "But thanks for the cruise voucher." I didn't slam the door, didn't look back, I just walked out. Because I knew the real meeting, the one that actually mattered, was still ahead of me. And when I sat down at the table with Titan's senior leadership a few days later, I wasn't there as someone begging to be seen. I was there as the person they had already decided to follow. The Titan Corp boardroom was quiet when I walked in, calm, serious, professional. But there was a different kind of energy in the air, the kind of energy that says, "We're not here to waste time," and neither was I. They greeted me not with handshakes and small talk, but with real questions, real curiosity. They wanted to know how I'd built the system, not just what it did, but why it worked so well. They asked about long-term improvements, how I'd approach the next 5 years of development, where I saw the tech going, how it could evolve as their needs grew, and most important of all, they asked me if I was still with the company. I paused for a second, not to think, but to let that moment hang in the air. "No," I said, "not anymore." They nodded, as if they had expected that, as if they'd already made their decision before I even walked in. "We want to move forward," one of them said, "but only with you at the helm. Not your old company, not with someone else speaking in your place. You." It wasn't an offer, it was a shift in power. In the days that followed, the fallout hit like a wrecking ball. Titan Corp's legal team sent a letter to my old company, a termination notice, effective immediately. The partnership was over. The news spread fast. By the end of the week, Slack channels were flooded with rumors. Internal meetings got canceled. Some folks got quiet, others got angry. HR tried to spin it as a strategic pivot. but nobody was buying it. They lost their biggest client because they tried to erase the one person that client trusted. And just like that, the company that once ignored me was now free-falling into chaos. Board members started asking questions, investors started pulling back, and the CEO, the man who once stood in front of a crowd and promised the world in my name, was nowhere to be found. Taking personal time, they said. I had a feeling he wouldn't be coming back. But me? I was just getting started. A week later, I signed a new contract. Not with Titan directly, but with a competitor company I'd been quietly talking to for months. A real offer. Real title. Triple the salary they once dangled in front of me. And best of all, Titan Corporation followed me there. The entire $40 million deal, every phase, every update, every innovation. We launched a brand new version of the AI system 6 months later. Faster, cleaner, smarter than before. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't just the guy behind the screen. I was the face of the project. I led the meetings. I made the calls. My name was on the documents, on the patents, in the trade magazines. People who used to walk past my desk without a word were now reaching out on LinkedIn, asking to grab coffee sometime. I didn't respond. Some doors, once shut, don't need to be reopened. A few months after the dust had settled, I found myself walking through the old part of town, not far from where the company's offices used to be. The building stood there, hollow and dim. The logo had been taken down, the windows dark, the lobby empty. The same place where I once stood in front of everyone, being promised the moon. I stopped for a moment, not out of bitterness, but reflection. Because I realized something. They didn't break me. They showed me where the cracks in their world were, and I built something better on my own. I used to think the key to success was waiting for someone to notice you, waiting for the right opportunity, the right words, the right nod from the right person in the right room. But I was wrong. The key isn't waiting. It's walking. Walking forward even when the lights go out, even when the applause stops, even when you've been shut out of the room, especially then. I never got back what they promised me. I got something better. I earned it. Without shortcuts, without faking it, without stepping on anyone to climb higher. And now? I don't need their stage. I built my own. And if you're watching this, if you've ever been passed over, underpaid, overlooked, if you've ever had someone use your hard work to shine while you stayed in the shadows, let me tell you this. You don't need permission to rise. You just need to stop waiting. Because the power? It was never theirs to give. It was yours the whole time.